So it's a little shocking to think that, a woman who admits that she has postpartum depression would be attacked by other people about how she handles it and things like that. Postpartum depression is not the baby blues. The baby blues happen to virtually every mom, and so that's not even remotely considered a disorder. Postpartum depression is considered a disorder because it only affects a small percentage of moms. And it typically happens in that postpartum period. It usually will start to have its onset in a couple of weeks after delivery, and it becomes progressively worse. And, Brooke Shields was really honest to describe how she felt and how horrible she felt about the things that she was feeling. But it's very typical of women who are experiencing postpartum depression. And there is treatment available. And if a woman has had postpartum depression following the birth of one baby, she's considered at higher risk for having postpartum depression after another baby. And so if she's pregnant, they'll oftentimes put her on antidepressants in the last phase of the pregnancy to get her stabilized so that she will already be under their influence when the baby is born, hoping to offset those horrible feelings and those horrible experiences that the mom might have had last time. It's really important for women to be willing to talk about these experiences and to not have people attack them for expressing what they're feeling. A lot of women just suffer in silence because they feel ashamed that they have these feelings that they're experiencing. But it is hormonal. It is due to, sleep deficits. It's due to, the changes in, responsibilities. Sometimes if there's been a difficult birth and there was like a touch and go moment where the baby might have died or something, they're like, mom was really scared, that can trigger it. And then they feel guilty because the baby made it and here I am feeling these feelings. And it's all just a bunch of guilt and bad feelings that don't need to happen when it is just a biological thing that oftentimes happens and that can be remedied. So that isolation is what can lead a lot of women to doing really horrible things for real. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Andrea Yates, who in a period of postpartum depression killed all of her children. And she had like 5. She thought they were all, she actually had what's called postpartum psychosis, which happens really rarely. Like 1 in 10,000 women will have this experience where they literally are believing things that aren't true. And she really believed that her children were possessed and that the only way to get the possession out of them was to hold them under the water until they stopped fighting. And that, of course, we all know as rational people was not getting the possession out of them, right? That's how her kids died. And so, postpartum depression can progress for a few women into that postpartum psychosis. And feeling isolated, feeling alone, and feeling like you can't say anything tends to make things just worse. And so if you know somebody who's ever had a baby or somebody who's going through things like this right now, it's really important that they feel supported, because otherwise they may avoid the kinds of treatments that would help them to actually emerge on the other side. So that's my little pep talk for today. Here we have another discussion, which is impaired fertility. We discussed earlier that if you go a year using chance alone as your birth control method, 85% of the time you'll end up pregnant by the end of the year. If you fall into the 15% who don't, then we call that impaired fertility. For different years and different things like that, the number of people who are experiencing this varies. Impaired fertility is usually reserved for people who have been trying and they've been timing it out and maybe even doing like ovulation detecting and all sorts of things, and they are not getting pregnant. So impaired fertility. What I wanted to talk about a little bit and really emphasize is that, I think we oftentimes have the stereotype that if a woman can't conceive, it's somehow her problem. When in fact, the causes of impaired fertility are just as likely to be the male as it is to be the female, or to be something that between the two of them they both are experiencing. It's something about the pair of them that's causing this outcome. When you have a couple that's having difficulty with fertility, oftentimes the woman will go first and get all of her blood work and all of her laparoscopic exploratory things done, everything. She'll get all the tests before her mate will go down and do the one test that's required of him, which is to ejaculate in a cup and have his sperm motility checked. It's really kind of interesting. It's oftentimes attributed to the female when in fact it's just as likely to be the male. So what causes it in the male? Well, 34% of the time there is no explanation. They just are having difficulty conceiving. And then there are all these other things. So we have undescended testicles. So the sperm isn't going to develop very well if it's inside the 98.6 body. We need to be down separate from the body so that the temperature will be lower so that sperm can be produced correctly. Urogenital infection, sexual factors, like they may not be doing it right. I just read a story, I am not kidding you, about a couple who was being treated for infertility, and it turned out that they were unaware that you actually have to put the penis in the vagina. They were apparently, I think it sounds like they must have been having anal sex, because what else could they have thought they were doing? But maybe he thought he was in the vagina when he was like just in the labia. I don't know exactly. They weren't super specific in the article, but the solution was a diagram and showing exactly where the penis needs to go in order to ensure fertility. It's a little surprising in this day and age, but it happens, right? Systemic disease is 3% of the time. Varicosely is where there's a twisted testicle. Hypogonadism, where the hormones are out of balance and you're not producing enough testosterone. Immune system factors, and then other causes that altogether make up about 8% of the time. I don't know why my picture is now sort of different for the female, but same basic idea. What's interesting about the female one is that it's almost equally likely, no matter what the explanation is, right? So we've got unexplained, and then we've got congenital anomalies, which are that's kind of vague. Acquired factors. Okay, so we're looking at probably talking about the fallopian tubes and those two pie wedges. And those would be, they were malformed during fetal development. Acquired factors might have to do with scarring and other things that might have happened thanks to stuff that happened in their childhood that they don't even know about. Urogenital infection, by the way, that can include STDs, stuff like that. Immunological factors, because remember we've talked about how the female body can attack the developing embryo, and that's what they're talking about here. Tubal damage, ovulatory failure, endometriosis, anomalies of the uterus, endocrine disturbances, so hormone imbalances. The point isn't for you to memorize all the different kinds of things and know what they mean. The point is to know that there are lots of different things that can cause infertility. Some of them are very treatable and some of them are not. I mean, unexplained is clearly not going to be very treatable. But anything having to do with hormone balances, those can oftentimes be treated, externally, taking some kind of medication or injections. There are lots of things that can overcome these problems, and that's the good news. Some of them can't be overcome, and that's the bad news. So when women are checking on their fertility, these are all the things that they go through to possibly, to figure out what might cause their, impaired fertility. For men, this is what they need to go through. And so I really wanted to sort of show that out of balance, intrusiveness that the woman has to go through versus what the man has to go through. Just to really illustrate that when a couple is, struggling with fertility, it seems like the simplest explanation would be to have the man checked out first, or they both go get their blood tests. They both go get their physical exam. The man does the semen analysis. And then we go into the invasive stuff on the woman, right? It just seems a little out of balance that the woman will clear all that stuff on the left before her mate says, well, I guess maybe it could be me. And it may turn out that it's neither, but it just seems like we shouldn't be getting all the intrusive stuff done first before we do the easy things. So I keep saying, there's things that we can do. Let's talk about some of the treatments. Again, I don't really want you to memorize necessarily all the terminology. The study guide will tell you if there's a particular term I want you to know, but this first one is like the least intrusive. There's medication that the woman can take to trigger ovulation. Using ultrasound, they can make sure that the follicles are ripening. And then the couple would just have regular intercourse, but do it at the time that the doctor indicates is the best, most likely time to do it. So this is of the treatment, sort of the least intrusive. Here we have now ovulation induction and follicle monitoring. And then now, instead of having coitus naturally, there's going to be artificial insemination where they actually deliver the sperm to the top of the uterus, giving it its best chance to make it up to that, recently ovulated egg. And then we have all the different variations of in vitro fertilization, where they actually remove the egg from the mom. They put it in a petri dish with sperm from the dad, and giving it that really best chance of one of the sperm making it into the egg. They might even do what's pictured here, which is where they actually inject a sperm into the egg. Like these sperm don't have what it takes to get through the shell, so we'll go ahead and give them that boost and get them inside the egg. So there's different degrees of how the fertilization would actually happen, and then there's different ways of actually transferring that developing blastocyst into the mom. So there's lots of things that they can do, and in fact, then they could put it into a surrogate if they need to. There's just a lot of different ways that they can take a person who's having fertility difficulties and actually working with their own genetic makeups and their hormonal patterns and other kinds of things, they result with a baby. These things are pretty pricey. These are not for the faint of heart. These are, ovulation induction is not the simplest thing. Mom has to take, shots, and it makes her feel like she's having the world's worst PMS moments and all sorts of things. But it's successful a lot of the time. It's not a guarantee, but it is a reasonably successful set of options that are available these days. All right. Well, hopefully I've covered everything in deep enough detail and you've got good answers to a lot of your questions, and the textbook can fill in some of the gaps and things that I didn't really want to bog us down with. So I will see you guys in the next segment or the next chapter.